Welcome back to the I've Created a Monster podcast, a weekly random chat where I chat about random things weekly. I am your host, Roshini Cope, aka Glamazini, out here on the internet. And as always, I am live with my patrons. To be live in the chat while I record the podcast, become a supporting patron at patreon.com/Glamazini, as well as get a bit of behind the scenes of my business and coaching and content. Today's going to be a different type of podcast, and soon you'll hear why. First of all, personal updates include today's headband. It is a very understated headband. If you watch on YouTube, you know that I'm always wearing like an animal headband. Well, not always. I wear the pom-poms. And today I am wearing a subtle red, white, and blue headband that I wasn't even sure I still had because just the sight of the American flag since 2016 has made me sick to my stomach. I also found a couple actual American flags. I don't know where these came from, and I could have stuck them in my hair to be even more obnoxious, but I'm feeling really low key today. And so we're going to do a low key podcast, and we're going to do a low key vibe, and we're going to do a low key headband. Next, am I monetized? The answer is no, but I am so much closer, which brings me to my experience from last week's video. I put up a video last week that really had a fascinating response from a certain side of the political spectrum. Let's talk about it. First of all, if you look on the screen, I now have 102 subscribers. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Grab a seat, grab a drink, enjoy yourself. I already have 3 video uploads in the last 90 days. We've hit that requirement, and I am slowly moving up the valid public watch hours at a solid 661 as of the taping of today's podcast. So what happened last week, Roshini? Well, I've been trying a totally different strategy the past few weeks with my titles and thumbnails, specifically choosing one topic from the video that I think will be clickable that I'm talking about in the video. Before that, I was just putting I've Created a Monster on the thumbnails to make it easy, and a whole string of different topics that I talked about in the video on the title. But I decided to change my mind and see how it works, and it's been working swimmingly. The first one I put, if you go to my page, you'll see it says gingers are black, which was a popular trending topic that was happening on TikTok. And that video has just short of 2,000 views, which is astonishing because I only have, as you hear, 102 subscribers on this channel. So the second week, I decided to go with black fatigue, another trending topic on TikTok. And that one wasn't as interesting to everyone. Only 86 views as of today. So the next week, I went with Deontay Kyle is pandering. And here's the thing about making choices like this. You are either going to attract people who absolutely agree with you, or you are going to attract dissenting voices. And I know that. And this particular video has over 1,000 views, which once again is astonishing for the number of subscribers that I have on this channel. But it attracted the light, basically, not the shadow, the people that agreed with me. And so for the most part, most of the comments on that video were positive. Yes, yes. So the next week I went with Accountability in 5, which is a spinoff from the Deontay Kyle concept. And that one did not do well at all. It only has 30 views. It only has 30 views. So last week's video worked entirely as intended. Why, Roshini? Because I decided to put Kamala won the election on the title and thumbnail. But unlike the gingers are black and the black fatigue, I also decided to remove any punctuation, any question mark, anything that showed me being inquisitive, and just put it as a flat declarative statement. And as I said, you will either get people who agree with you or a bunch of people who hate your guts and don't like what you're saying. And last week's video, I got the latter. I attracted the MAGA people, which I understood that I could do. Why, Roshini? Because I am a pretty seasoned content creator. And on my Facebook page for many years, I had viral videos out the wazoo and attracted all sorts of people. So I understand how the thing works. The thing that is wild is I had stopped making videos with political content specifically on Facebook for the exact reason of not attracting MAGA people. Because I noticed the devolution of cognition over the years, and it was just exhausting, you know? So I think I even put up a video once when people were begging me to continually keep making videos about political topics that made them laugh. And I was like, I don't feel like doing it because I don't like attracting these people to my page. Hey everyone, it's Roshini of glamazini.com bringing you light and laughter per usual. Listen, I got this inbox message a few months ago from a lovely viewer named Patricia Hines. Hey Patricia, how you doing? And she was like, hey Glamazini, you used to make videos about positions. And I didn't know what she was talking about. I thought she was speaking in tongues or she was having a seizure or something. So I did not respond because the way my inbox is set up, I just can't. Especially after that Black Panther video, people was wilding out. Anyway, so I ignored it. Anyway, fast forward to recently, like today, yesterday, day before, who knows, whatever. I was in there. And I saw that she wrote me again. And this time she clarified in the Queen's English. And she said, hey Glamazini, you used to make political videos. Not positions. Political videos. And you don't anymore. There's so much stuff going on right now that's hilarious in these hearings. I'm assuming she means the impeachment hearings. Why aren't you making political words, English? Why aren't you making political videos? Make us laugh. Which kind of sounds like Dance Monkey, but I know that's not what you mean, boo-boo. Anyway, so here's the gist. I know I have made several videos of a political nature, okay? Michelle Obama didn't do her hair for the inauguration one, just because I had to get that out of my spirit. About Maxine Waters and Steve Mnuchin. I've talked about Meghan McCain and Joy Behar. I've done a few videos about political topics, but the problem is, come close. These people in the political space are crazy. And I don't want to attract those people to my channel or my page or whatever. Like, I'm not even joking. So yes, the way my mental health is set up, I have not been able to even watch most political things since -45 became president. I am not even joking. Before the election, I watched every debate. I was on it. I was watching everything. The day I found out who won president, it was like my brain short-circuited, and I just realized that there were a lot of people out there making life decisions like this. And honestly, it kind of scared me. So it's not a funny video. This is just a video to let y'all know that the reason why I am not making some sort of like internet dynasty where I am constantly covering the election, the debates, the impeachment hearing, it's just because I can't spend the time watching the impeachment hearings. I can't spend the time listening to -45 and the first, I can't because it just like makes my brain melt and roll out of my ears in a way that I probably need to talk to my therapist about. Being a person that is super big on mental health and like healing and community relationships and that kind of stuff, it scares the living daylights out of me that human beings make decisions from these places of brokenness and trauma. That's what it comes off like to me. No judgment, but judgment. So that's the answer to your question, Patricia Hines or whatever, about why you don't see like daily, weekly political videos coming from me. I just can't mentally handle it. I definitely don't want to deal with them in my inbox. Like after the Black Panther video and people call me everything but a child of God. Y'all can't even imagine what my inbox was like. And do y'all want to be fighting -45 people in whatever? Anyway, so that's the reason why. However, as you hear, I am trying to be monetized. And so listen, I will take whatever comes here to get me toward my monetization goal. And last week's video has 862 views on it. That is an astonishing performance. They were in the comment section crashing out and hitting all the buttons. And it was just engagement central. And they were saying all the things that you would expect them to say to me. However, I did see one of them mention that they thought it was engagement farming. And I was like, look at that one. That one is super smart. Now, I'm not going to be mean to anybody because I do realize that people who vote in the direction against their and other people's interests are either not smart or they are evil and mean. And the evil and mean in an adult typically stems from some sort of trauma. And because I am a life coach, I do have concern for those people. However, I don't like drawing them as easily as they were drawn, but I do see why negative 92 decided to beckon them to use them for his power goals because it was so easy to like saddle up and use them for my view goals. Anyway, I'm not going to do that anymore because it's exhausting. And so, for the most part, it was fun while it lasted. I giggled at a lot of the crash outs in the comments. And yeah, if you want to know more about my intentional content strategies, become a patron, okay? Because I've been doing this for a really long time. And I expected that to happen, and they did not disappoint. And hopefully, sooner rather than later, I can be monetized, and they helped me. Next. And now, today's very, very atypical video where I woke up this morning and thought about what I wanted to talk about on the podcast. And I actually want to summarize the United States Constitution. You want to do what, Roshini? I feel like summarizing the United States Constitution, not reading it aloud verbatim, but actually going through and reading you guys summaries of the Constitution, because I feel like in the particular political climate that we're in, we could all use a refresher. And for some of us, it might be the first time. Before I move forward, I would be remiss to not mention the No Kings protest that happened this past Saturday, June the 14th. I love the idea of No Kings Day. And I think that we should take that day and every year celebrate No King's Day to remind ourselves that we are actually a constitutional federal republic and not a monarchy. And as I saw the numbers, I think they said over 5 million people were out across the country. It may have been breaking records as the largest protest we've ever had, but I'm not sure. You guys know my sources are often kind of wonky. Although this particular video, I actually have sources. That was something that the MAGA people were really upset about. They were upset about the fact that my opinion-based podcast with a woman sitting in her office with bunny ears on didn't have reputable sources, which shows how they got into the situation they were in. Bring it back. So today I'm just going to read you some summaries that myself and AI helped generate based off of the United States Constitution, because we could all use a refresher. The first thing that I asked AI to help me with is just to tell us what form of government the United States has. The United States, like I said, is a federal republic form of government. What does that mean? It is a republic where the power is held by the people. It is a republic where the power is held by the people that are in the United States. Okay. And those powers are exercised through elected officials that are elected by those people to represent them. You following? And then we operate under a constitution. And that constitution divides the power between the national government and the state government. So what's the Constitution, Roshini? Well, a constitution is the foundational document of our government, and it establishes the framework and the principles under which we govern. So let's go through each piece by piece. The United States is a constitutional federal republic. Constitutional means that the U.S. government operates under a written constitution that outlines the structure and the powers and the limitations of that government, right? Federal means that the power is shared. The power is shared between the national government, which is the federal part, and the government of the states. So there's a federal government and there's state governments, and the power is shared. A republic means that the citizens, the people, elect representatives to make decisions and govern on their behalf, because all of us can't govern. There are too many of us, right? So we the people, elect representatives to govern on our behalf, right? Rather than participating individually in government decisions, right? So that's what the republic part means. There are 3 branches to our federal government, okay? The legislative, the executive, and the judicial. The judicial is the courts, supreme and down. The executive is negative 92 and his foolishness. And the legislative is the Congress, which is the House of Representatives and the Senate. Amen. The House of Representatives handles things like taxes and the government spending. And the Senate is more about presidential appointments and things like judges and ambassadors and approving treaties, etc., etc. Each state gets 2 senators, no matter how big or small it is. But in the House of Representatives, the state gets representatives depending on the population. So the bigger the state, the more reps they have. Fun fact, I was born in the United States Virgin Islands, which is an unincorporated territory, which is a fancy way of saying one of the various levels of a colony that you can be. And we have a representative in the House. We have a voice, but no vote. I was actually an intern for our representative many, many years ago. Next. Very important in the United States is also a concept called separation of powers. What is that, Roshini? I'm glad you asked. That means that each branch of the government has its own unique powers and responsibility. And the design is called checks and balances, which is basically to keep everybody in check and make sure that nobody has too much power and that there is no tyranny. That's in the design. That's in the design. Okay. So checks and balances means each branch has some power, but not all the power. And they also have the power to limit the actions of the other 2 branches. Yes? Yes. So nobody can come out here acting like they're a king, a monarch, or a dictator, no matter how much they want to on their birthday with squeaky tanks. So once again, a constitution is the document that we use to establish the framework for this specific federal republic that we live in. It's the document. And that's why I thought it would be really interesting to just go through and summarize the Constitution. But I am going to summarize each article and each amendment because, hey, why not? And if you would like a source, I got all of my constitutional text from the National Archives. You can find that at archives.gov. Since some of y'all from the last video was so concerned about sources, I'm trying to figure out how they were so concerned about sources when this man made them vote him in. I mean, just saddled up on their back with a bunch of bots and Facebook ads where they just read the title and the thumbnail and went about their business, decided that what he said was truth when all he saw was low-hanging fruit, but now all of a sudden they wanted to ask me for sources. Anyway, let's get started. The first part of the Constitution is called the preamble. Many of us had to memorize it when we were in school. I had to memorize it, but I don't remember all of it. So I do have notes and I am reading a lot of these summaries. Okay. I'm going to read you the preamble because I feel like that part's super good and juicy and it really sets the atmosphere for what we're going to be going into. And then everything else after that is just going to be summaries. Let's get into it. The preamble of the Constitution. We the people is how that thing starts, okay? We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, meaning they wanted to form a union they thought was going to function better than the one they had came from, which was England. Yeah? Okay. In order to also establish justice and to ensure domestic tranquility. Yeah? And to ensure domestic tranquility, right? Where people could go to sleep at night and not be worried about unarmed agents breaking in and grabbing them, whether or not they're a U.S. citizen, like the guy today who is a U.S. citizen and who is a senator, or I don't remember what his role was, but the video where he was like, what is the due process that you have for detaining me? You cannot detain American citizens, and ICE was still detaining. Right? So in order to ensure domestic tranquility and provide common defense, promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty. Liberty means freedom, by the way, just in case you forgot the meaning of that word. To ourselves and our posterity, right? Us now and the people coming, which is us. We're the people coming. Do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. That's what the founding fathers started with. So basically, that opening statement explains the purpose of the document of the Constitution, which is the foundational document that establishes the framework of this new government that we are now living in. It sets the goal of unity. It sets the goal of fairness. It sets the goal of peace, right? That part about ensure domestic tranquility. It sets the goal of defense, prosperity, and freedom for current and future generations. And like I said, you can find all of this at archives.gov. And then it is broken up into 7 articles, the actual Constitution. The Articles of the Constitution, 1787 is the year we're looking at. And the first article, Article 1, establishes the legislative branch, which is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. It gives Congress the power to make the laws of the land. They also have power to collect taxes, to declare war, and some more things. It explains how members of the Congress, which is the House of Representatives, and the Senate are chosen, and how laws are passed, and what limits exist on the government's powers. Article 2 establishes the executive branch, which unfortunately, in the year of our Lord 2025, when I am recording this, is the branch that is run amok with negative 92 and his infestation. That article establishes the role of a president and a vice president and explains how they are elected, what powers they have. For example, leading the military, you get the commander in chief that they always talk about, vetoing laws, as well as making treaties, including how the president can be removed. Now, I thought it'd be interesting to actually read a few of the parts of Article 2, Section 1, which is how the Constitution establishes the executive power. It says here, before he enters, which I think is interesting, it says he. Before he enters on the execution of his office, he shall take the following oath or affirmation. Quote, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, which is the thing I'm reading right now. The oath is to preserve, protect, and defend the document that is established that I'm reading. I'm summarizing. It also says down here in Section 4 that the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. That was a direct quote right off of the archives.gov website. Okay, let's get back to our summary. Article 3 of the Constitution establishes the judiciary branch. That branch of the government is the federal court systems, all right? This includes the Supreme Court and down. It outlines cases of law that can be heard, as well as how judges are appointed and how long they can serve. It also defines the crime of treason and how it should be handled. So let's read that. Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution says, treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. The Congress shall have power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attender of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. What the hell does that mean? Give me a second. According to AI in 2025 English, that basically means that if someone is convicted of treason, their punishment cannot extend to their family. Their children will not lose rights or property because of what they did, and the government can only take their stuff while they're alive. I did catch that part on the end, okay? And it matters because in Europe, which is where they were coming from, and they were trying to perfect the union beyond, if someone was convicted of treason, their entire family could be punished, disinherited, or disgraced for generations. So the Constitution basically says, no, just that one person gets to be punished. Actually, that's very nice of you, founding fathers. Article 4 of the Constitution describes the relationship between the states and the federal government. The states have to respect each other's laws and court decisions. We are individual states. It also explains how new states are added and how the government protects each state from invasion or violence. Which is wild work when you think about the fact that last week our negative 92 president was sending in federal troops to a state against the desires of the governor of that state and the mayor of the city. Anyway, just for fun fact, Article 4, Section 3 reads, and I quote, "New states may be admitted by the Congress into this union, but no new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state," which means you can't just put a state in a state, "nor any state be formed by the junction of two or more states," which means you can't just chomp little cookie monster bites out of two states and make a state in the middle, or parts of a state. You can't break it up without the consent of the legislatures of the states concerned as well as the Congress. Section 4. The United States shall guarantee to each state in this union a republican form of government, meaning a republic, not the political party Republican, and shall protect each of them against invasion. On an application of the legislature or of the executive, when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. Which in the timeline that we're living in sounds real suspect. I'm not saying that's what's going on, but it's adjacent. It has the S, it has the LaCroix of problematic stuff. Article 5 of the Constitution explains how the Constitution can be changed. We use a process called amending. Amendments can be proposed by 2/3 of the Congress or the states and must be approved by 3/4 of the states. This allows the Constitution to grow and adapt over time. And we have had many amendments, all of which I will summarize shortly. And one as recently as 1992. Did you know that? I don't know if I knew that. And if I did know it, my perimenopausal special needs mom brain forgot. Article 6 of the Constitution says that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, which I told you earlier. It is a document we use to establish how we're going to govern in this new perfected union that we're working on, okay? It says that the Constitution is the highest law of the land, and federal laws and treaties override state laws. All the government officials must promise to uphold the Constitution, and no religious tests can be required for government jobs. Let's go to Article 6. I said I wasn't going to read all of these, but it's just so interesting. No religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. And I'm reading this as a Christian, just in case somebody's new here. I just want everybody to know that that's a direct quote right out of Article 6 from the Constitution. Okay. Religion is not supposed to be part of the mix. Article 7 of the Constitution is all about ratification, right? It describes how the Constitution became official. It was adopted when the 9 of the 13 states at the time ratified the Constitution. The article also includes the names of the founding fathers who signed the Constitution. And those names are representatives from Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And if you want to see a copy of the Constitution and read a transcript, you can go to archives.gov and then visit the founding documents, Constitution, and then transcript. And now let's go to the amendments, because if you remember, Article 5 said the Constitution can be changed, and it is changed by adding on to it, not by subtracting things out of the articles, but by adding on to clarify and make it better as we go forward. And in that process over the years, spanning from 1795 to 1992, we have had a total of 27 amendments to the Constitution. The first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights. And those amendments include the First Amendment, which is protection of our 5 freedoms, which include freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, and freedom of petition. Let's talk about 2 of those. Freedom of religion is in the First Amendment, and it does not say freedom to be a Christian. And I'm saying this as a Christian. Liberty of religion. Additionally, liberty of press, which is a fascinating thing to think about now that we're in 2025 and people have manipulated the media in the way that they have. But it's right there in the First Amendment. And as a reminder, freedom to assemble and to petition and to speak. Yeah. Today, I saw somebody getting detained by ICE, a US citizen. I've seen a senator be handcuffed. I don't think he was actually jailed, but handcuffed for asking questions last week or the week before. So yeah, right there in the First Amendment, the very first one, the first one. Okay, the first one, 1791. Second Amendment is the one that MAGA loves. Boy, for some reason, they don't know nothing else in the Constitution except this one. And this is the one that protects our right to bear arms. It also says that people have rights to have their weapons for personal safety and a potential militia situation. The Third Amendment says that the government cannot force people to house soldiers in their homes. And this was specifically in reaction to the practice of the British government before the Revolutionary War, where people could be forced to house soldiers in their homes. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable search and seizures. The police and the government must have a good reason and a warrant to search your property, which is wild work. When you see some of these things happening with people getting caught up, even last weekend, where the Speaker of the House in Minnesota was murdered, assassinated, her and her husband, and this person was dressed as a law enforcement officer. And based off of the press conference, the suspect was approached by a police officer, a female police officer, pulled up next to him in her car, thought he was a police officer, tried to converse with him. He did not respond. And I don't know what she just left. And then after that, this person murdered the Minnesota Speaker of the House, of the Minnesota House. We also have plainclothes ICE agents running around grabbing people up. And even when people try to exercise their Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable searches and seizures being recorded by 75 cell phones, it's like the wild, wild west out here nowadays. May the odds be ever in our favor. The Fifth Amendment gives protections against people being accused of crimes. You cannot be tried twice for the same crime or forced to testify against yourself. Property cannot be taken without fair payment, and you must be treated fairly under the law. And I want to say this, the Constitution of the United States, to my understanding, applies to people who are within our jurisdiction, whether or not they are here legally or not. They are allowed due process under our law. That is my understanding of how that works. I don't see a lot of people in MAGA comment sections when I unfortunately stumble into them who understand that. They have started weaponizing the word illegal as though all of them don't have a parking ticket in their glove box. And people with undocumented entry to this country, it's a civil offense, just like jaywalking and your parking ticket. So not exactly. Anyway, let's continue. The Sixth Amendment guarantees speedy public trials for criminal cases. You have the right to a lawyer and to know the charges against you, which is what the gentleman who was being detained today was asking while they kept detaining, and nobody responded to that man. And there were so many people recording him. And you have the right to see and question witnesses. So they can't just grab you up, put you somewhere, and not give you due course of law, a lawyer. to know what you're being charged with, and to have to provide witnesses. The Seventh Amendment gives people the right to a jury trial in civil, meaning non criminal cases, in the federal courts. It also helps ensure fairness in disputes between individuals. Fun fact, this year and last year, I was brought in to be screened for jury duty. And this year, I actually made it quite far and got into the courtroom with the judge in the screening. And it was going to be a really long and drawn out criminal case. But, because I'm a mom with special needs, both years that has gotten me out of it. But my goodness, it sounded like it was about to be a doozy because we got to speak to all the attorneys and they were asking us questions and it was a lot. And they were like, are you afraid of hearing this? They ran down a list of like 25, 30 different names they wanted us to see. Like, do you know this person? Do you know that person? Do you know? Because local. And it was kind of horrific what was going on, what the trial was about. They were like, do you have any issue with this? And the topic of the trial and seeing these types of images. And and even when we went on our lunch break, there was a guy there who was really upset because he wanted to do a big jury trial as like a bucket list thing. And he wasn't able to because he was an accountant and it was tax season. So anyway, that's a thing. So I'm always down at the courthouse because for some reason they keep calling me up for jury duty. The Eighth Amendment bans excessive bail or fines or cruel and unusual punishment. Sentences must be fair and not overly harsh. Okay. Nobody's getting thrown into the hole, hopefully. Nobody's getting drawn and quartered. Nobody's getting all of those types of things that used to happen back in the day here in the US of A. And hopefully it stays that way because we have some people who try to go back to something they thought was great. Like they don't understand why the people who were back there tried to get out of it. The Ninth Amendment says that people have other rights beyond those listed in the Constitution. Just because it isn't listed here doesn't mean it doesn't exist, which is fascinating to me because what in the world happened that made them feel like they had to write that? Somebody tried to say that this was all we got, and they were like, we have to put in for these dodo birds. No, ma'am, no, Pam. Okay, let me go to the actual. The enumeration of, this is the Ninth Amendment. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. That's basically what it says. These are not the only rights that you have, so don't play that with us. And the 10th Amendment says that the powers not given to the federal government belong to the state and the people. And this protects the state's authority and individual freedoms. Because remember, the entire government is a government of the people who elect representatives to work out this triune government branch thing that the founding fathers came up. But it's a government of the people, by the people, for the people, that whole thing. Okay. And then that was the Bill of Rights. So that was amendments 1 through 10. And then Amendment 11 was ratified in 1795. And it says that there's a limit on lawsuits against the states. People from other states or countries cannot sue a state in federal court without that state's consent, which is fascinating. Let's go find it. I thought I wasn't going to read any of these things like outright, but some of them I'm interested in reading. The Constitution was modified by Amendment 11. The judicial power of the United States shall not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States by citizens of another state or by citizens or subjects of any foreign state. Interesting. That is exactly what that says. Okay. Amendment 12 came in 1804, and it changes how the president and the vice president are elected. They now run together as a team or separate ballots instead of runner-up becoming the vice president, which is what I was thinking when it was saying the vice president earlier, because back in the day, it used to be that the runner-up became the vice president. Which is kind of crazy. Like you want to be the president, but they say, well, you didn't win, but you're like the understudy. But now, as you see, the president picks a running mate, and that's how they do it as a team. Although it says here that they could be separate ballots, it's a long amendment, so I'm not going to read it. But according to this summary that AI generated for the 12th Amendment, the vice president could also be, yeah, it's right here. It says, I found it. They shall name in their ballots the person voted for as president And in distinct ballots, the person voted for as vice president. The 13th Amendment came in 1865, and it says that slavery has to end, which is appropriate because Juneteenth is coming up in 2 days. It is June 17th when I'm recording this, and Juneteenth is June 19th, okay? Which is when the slaves realized or were told that they were free. Not necessarily when they were legally free, but when they found out, which was after they were actually legally freed. Okay, so the 13th Amendment ends slavery and forced labor, except as a punishment for crime. Remember that, okay? When you hear people talk about the prison industrial complex, they are talking about the fact that slavery kind of still exists in the sense that you can still create laws that enslave a particular group of people because those laws catch people whose lived experiences tend toward that thing. It also made slavery illegal across the United States. But, there are a lot of people, if you go into the intellectual spaces, especially Black intellectual spaces or people of color intellectual spaces, that argue that slavery never ended because you still have a free workforce in the prison system. And it just went right from slavery to imprisonment and still getting a bunch of free labor. I don't know much about it, but I'm just saying. It says right here it's supposed to be over. And a lot of people say in the year of our Lord 2025, it is not. The 14th Amendment gives citizenship to anyone born or naturalized in the United States. It guarantees equal protection under the law and says states cannot take away rights without due process. Another thing that is fascinating to think about in 2025 when we have this wannabe fascist, wannabe dictator dude infecting our republic with his effery. And even though his wife, his partner in crime until he left, Mr. Muskrat, and so many people, his wife's parents, were not either here legally when they first came or they became naturalized in ways that he's trying to actually end the process. It's exhausting. All right, let's keep going. In 1870, the 15th Amendment was added, and that says that voting rights cannot be denied based on race or former status as a slave. It aimed to ensure that African American men could vote. Not me, the men, 1870. Remember that. In 1913, the 16th Amendment was added, and that gave Congress the power to collect income taxes. It allowed the government to raise money based on how much people earn, which I think is a horrible idea. Let's go to the tape. Okay, where is it? Who did it and why? Okay, this is me reading verbatim. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census and enumeration. Hated it. Anyway, the 17th Amendment happened in 1913, which was the same year as the 16th Amendment, and that allowed voters to elect senators directly because before that, the state legislatures picked the senators. The 18th Amendment came a few years later in 1919, and it banned the making, selling, and transporting of alcohol. It was later repealed by the 21st Amendment. I think it's interesting that there was an amendment for the prohibition. I don't know that listen, if I learned it in school, it was a long time ago. But that was prohibition. That was when they tried to ixnay on the alcohol pay, and then they eventually had to retract it. Which makes sense because that happened in 1919. And if you think about prohibition, you think about the roaring 20s, so that the next year would have been the 20s and yada, yada, yada. Okay. And speaking about the 20s, in 1920, the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote, finally. But still not me, kind of, because mine didn't come until the 60s. Okay. The Wahite women. Okay. So the black men, they was up in here in the 1870s. And the white women, they were getting their rights to vote in 1920. Just so we can all be clear. So that gave it to the women. the white women. And the 15th Amendment gave it to the black men. The black men. Okay. Still not me. For all the people that are in my comments flapping their lips as though they know what was going on. They don't. Let's keep going. The 20th Amendment happened in 1933, and that one moves the start of the presidential and congressional terms to January, which reduced the time the officials stayed in office after losing an election. So if you see Amendment 20, Section 1, which I'm reading verbatim, the terms of the president and vice president shall end at noon on the 20th day of January. I didn't know that it was like a specific time of day either. I knew it was a day, but not a specific time. And the terms of senators and representatives at noon on the third day of January of the years in which such terms would have ended if this article had not been ratified, and the terms of their successors shall then begin. I guess it makes sense to have an exact time so that people know exactly when they were in office and when they weren't. So that makes perfect sense. Amendment 21 repealed Amendment 18, which we said earlier, and ended prohibition, and alcohol became legal again. The 21st Amendment happened in 1933. The 22nd Amendment happened in 1951, and that limited the presidential term to 2 election terms. Thank you, Jesus. Hey, thank you. Because this dodo bird we got here, he going dictatorship in his brain. And whoever came up with the need for, I feel like I remember that story, but I don't have the concept of who came up with it. It was a president that came up with it. Eisenhower? I don't know. But whoever came up with it, I thank you. A person can serve a maximum of 10 years if they take over from someone else's midterm. So let's say somebody croaks, they take over, they get voted in again for one term, they get voted in again. So the most that they could do is a 10-yearer. Yeah? Like VP into reelected. The 23rd Amendment gives the people in Washington, D.C., the right to vote for president. Now that's raggedy. The people in the District of Columbia couldn't vote. Listen, I don't know what D.C. statehood designation is. Like I told you, the U.S. Virgin Islands is an unincorporated territory, and there are 7 different levels of state to non-state and 5 colony versions of things in between. Incorporated territory, unincorporated territory, Commonwealth, possible. Maybe the District of Columbia is one of the ones I'm not thinking about. Maybe it's, I don't know. I know Puerto Rico is a Commonwealth. So we don't have the right to vote for president in an unincorporated territory in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And apparently in 1961, the District of Columbia finally got the right to vote for president. They get the same number of electoral votes as the smallest state. Interesting. I don't know that I knew that that's when that happened. The 24th Amendment happened in 1964 and banned poll taxes, meaning people cannot be charged money to vote in federal elections. If you saw the videos that were going viral last year in 2024 during the election for when Kamala was running, there were Black women, older Black women, who were describing that they had to pay poll taxes. They had to pay poll taxes. I think I even saw a lady pull out an old document she had, an old lady. She had like a cane. She was wobbling her way in there to vote for Kamala. And she was talking about how she had to pay poll taxes. And the fact that people feel like all this stuff happened so long ago, when the people who experienced it are still alive, still have the documents. 1964, you guys. Anyway, the 25th Amendment explains what happens if the president dies. Hold it together, Roshini. Or if they resign or become unable to serve. It allows for the vice president to temporarily take over if needed. The 26th Amendment, which happened in 1971, lowered the voting age to 18. It was passed during the Vietnam War when 18-year-olds could be drafted but were not allowed to vote. which does seem quite unfair. So good for them. And then the final amendment so far, because there can always be more, is the 27th Amendment of the Constitution, which was passed in 1992. I was alive. Okay, this is the only one I was alive for. And the 27th Amendment says that any change to Congress's pay will not take effect until after the next election, which makes perfect sense because that means that they can't vote themselves immediate raises. And it makes you wonder what was happening before 1992. Were they voting themselves immediate raises? Anyway, that is what I felt like doing on today's podcast. And like I said, it's a very atypical thing for me to do. If you're new here, no, I don't sit here and read foundational documents from our government off of government websites on a regular basis wearing a headband. I'm usually covering pop culture topics, trying to be light on the politics, but based off of the world we're living in right now, I felt like we could all use a refresher and or learn some of this stuff for the first time. If you enjoyed it, leave a comment down below and let me know what you learned. And don't forget that I am taking a break and I will be back in July for our next taping. And possibly I'll call it season 2 of the I've Created a Monster podcast. This podcast is sponsored by patreon.com/Glamazini and the Black Women Healing Fund, which is a fund that provides financial support to Black and West Indian women on a healing journey. If you would like to support the fund, become a supporting patron at patreon.com/Glamazini. And don't forget to show up, to speak up, to F something up, and create your own monster. Bye, y'all.